All right, so picture this.
You're driving past one of those massive skyscrapers they've got going up downtown.
And there's this, like, web of metal scaffolding just clinging to the side.
You might think, huh, scaffolding keeps people from falling, right?
Right.
But honestly, there's way more to it than meets the eye.
And that's what we're diving into today, folks. The surprisingly complex role of a construction scaffolding supervisor.
You guys asked for it, and we aimed to please. Luckily, RoleCatcher has this crazy in-depth career guide on this very thing.
And get this, it's not just about knowing how to, like, put one metal pole on top of another. We're talking load calculations, different systems, ring, cut block. It's a whole thing. And of course, making sure everything's by the book, safety first, all that good stuff.
It's fascinating, really. We're talking about a job where you need the spatial reasoning of, like, a pro Tetris player.
Yeah.
But then you've got to be as detail-oriented as an accountant. And to top it off, have the nerves of steel to be responsible for people's lives, all rolled into one person.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So everyone listening, imagine you're right there with us, hard hats on.
Stepping onto a bustling construction site, dust in the air, grounds rumbling under your feet.
And amidst all that chaos, our construction scaffolding supervisor is the one making sure the whole operation runs like a well-oiled, well-scaffolded machine.
Absolutely. RoleCatcher really hammers home this point. It's not just about putting up the scaffolding, it's planning the entire thing from the second those materials show up. We're talking about coordinating those deliveries, figuring out how to get stuff through a construction site, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly spacious, all while making sure every single piece matches up perfectly with what the engineers drew up.
Like orchestrating a ballet. Except instead of dancers, you've got these massive steel beams swinging through the air, and one wrong step could spell disaster.
Exactly. And just like a choreographer maps out each and every move, our supervisor has to consider every possible hazard. The RoleCatcher guide digs into how important site assessments are. They've got to spot any potential weak spots, see how the building itself impacts the scaffolding, and then come up with a safety plan so tight nothing could go wrong.
Okay, see, that's what really blew my mind. You think construction supervisor, you think gruff, no nonsense, but this is like they're creating a culture of safety.
Almost like a coach, right? Making sure their team, everyone on site, has each other's backs.
Exactly, and that takes us beyond the technical stuff. You need serious leadership and communication skills for that, explaining complex ideas to the crew, earning their respect, making sure they all go home safe at the end of the day.
Which, let's be real, that's got to be tough. Tight deadlines, budget constraints, probably Mother Nature throwing a wrench in the works every now and then.
Oh, for sure. And on top of all that, RoleCatcher talks about the business side too. It's not just about building, it's managing it like its own little company.
So we're back to that Tetris playing mastermind we were talking about.
Exactly. Budgeting, tracking materials, putting out fires when there are delays. It's all part of the gig. Say a shipment of specialized clamps gets held up, that throws the whole schedule off. Supervisor's got to think fast, rejig the order of things maybe, tell everyone what's going on, all while trying to keep things moving as smoothly as possible. High stakes, problem solving, for sure.
And all while making sure every single bolt, every platform is documented down to the last detail to keep those regulations happy. Talk about a love for checklists. But hey, that attention to detail probably explains why RoleCatcher says these folks can earn a pretty penny.
That's right. The average is somewhere around $75,000. But if you've got experience, maybe some extra certifications, particularly in those bigger projects, you can earn way more.
So you're saying this isn't just a job, it's a career path with serious potential. That's got to be a big factor for anyone thinking about this line of work.
Absolutely. It's something to consider, for sure. But got to be realistic. RoleCatcher lays it out, straight long hours, definitely not a 9 to 5, working outside in whatever weather gets thrown at you.
Not for the faint of heart, or those who prefer their offices with, climate control and such.
Exactly. But then again, not everyone gets a kick out of seeing a skyscraper go up and knowing their work was a part of that. That's got to be pretty cool.
There's something to be said for that feeling of accomplishment, of creating something tangible.
For sure. So how do you go from, like, fresh-faced newbie to seasoned scaffolding pro? Because I'm guessing they don't just hand you the blueprints on day one and say, go build a skyscraper, right?
Time to talk career progression. Let's hear it from rookie to the big leagues. How does one climb that scaffolding ladder?
It's definitely a process. RoleCatcher's guide, it lays out this whole path you can take, right? Starting with those entry-level gigs, getting your hands dirty, learning the ins and outs of actually putting together and taking apart different types of scaffolding.
So there's hope for those of us who don't know a cup block from a coffee cup. You don't need to be an engineering whiz from day one.
Not at all. It's all about building that foundation, literally. Learning to spot the different parts, how they fit together, and, super important, how to work safely as a team.
Like an apprenticeship, kind of. You're earning while you're learning.
Exactly. And the more experience you get, the more responsibility you take on. Maybe you're running a small crew or tackling a more complicated section of the scaffolding. RoleCatcher, they actually have this great example of an entry-level supervisor, after a few years, gets put in charge of all the scaffolding for this restoration project.
Okay, hold on. Restoration, so we're talking like old buildings, historic stuff.
Exactly, some historic building. And anyone who's seen those old places knows they weren't exactly built with straight lines in mind.
That's putting it mildly.
So this supervisor, they had to get seriously creative with the scaffolding design. It had to support the building, but also, not damage any of those historic features. Talk about a balancing act.
High wire act, more like it. So this example, they really had to up their game, think outside the box.
Exactly. That's what separates those who are just there to punch a clock from the ones who really want to master the craft, right? And it's that kind of dedication that gets you to those senior positions, overseeing huge projects, handling the big bucks, showing those rookie scaffolders the ropes.
And here's where things get interesting, right? Because we're in the age of drones, AI, all that. Is the future of scaffolding, like robots with hard hats. What does that look like for our ambitious scaffolding supervisor?
People are definitely asking that question. But it's not about replacing humans. It's more like, how can technology give those supervisors even more tools in their tool belt?
So less Terminator, more like giving our scaffolding pros an upgrade.
Exactly. Take drones, for instance. Instead of climbing all of this huge scaffold to see if anything's wearing down, send a drone up, equip it with some high-tech cameras, sensors, safer, faster, and you get crazy detailed info you can use to keep things in tip-top shape.
So instead of reacting to problems, they're preventing them. Smart.
And then there's 3D printing. That could totally revolutionize scaffolding materials. What if, instead of using standard parts, you just print exactly what you need right there on site using these super strong, lightweight material?
Wait, hold up. So you're saying, like, neat a weird-shaped bracket for a curved wall, no problem, just hit print.
Exactly. It's like having a scaffolding factory right there on your construction site.
That's wild. But with all of this tech talk, what about the human touch? Are things like communication and leadership still going to be important?
Even more so. I mean, you could have the best drone in the world, but if you can't get your point across to the crew, it's useless.
Yeah.
Same with managing money, dealing with surprises. Those are human skills technology can't replace.
Right, because no app can replace good old-fashioned communication and problem-solving when those inevitable curveballs show up.
Exactly. It's about being able to adapt, learn quickly, and be open to new ways of doing things. And that reminds me, RoleCatcher really stresses this. Networking. In construction, who you know matters just as much as what you know.
Time to dig out that dusty Rolodex. Or is it all LinkedIn these days?
It's a mix. RoleCatcher actually has this whole section on how to network in construction. Conferences, joining those professional groups, even just making an effort to chat with other pros at events. Get your name out there, builds relationships.
Because you never know who might be looking for someone with your exact skill set. Especially with technology creating all these new opportunities, right?
Exactly. And speaking of opportunities, it's not all skyscrapers and office blocks. Scaffolding's got some pretty niche areas.
Oh, I am here for the niche scaffolding deep dive. Hit me with it.
Well, first one that comes to mind, bridge construction, bridge maintenance. Those massive suspension bridges. The scaffolding involved.
Wow, yeah. I never even thought about that. We're talking crazy heights, working over water, wind. I bet that's a whole other ballgame.
You said it. Totally different set of skills. You need specialized knowledge about how much weight things can handle, structural engineering, even water safety protocols, high stakes. And then there's industrial scaffolding.
Okay, now we're talking power plants, oil rigs, those massive facilities.
You got it. We're talking scaffolding around heavy machinery, dangerous materials, tight spaces, very little room for error.
I bet your average safety meeting doesn't quite cover all that. What else do they need to know?
Right. Supervisors in those environments, they got to be on top of things like fire safety, how to handle dangerous materials, emergency plans. It's not just about the scaffolding holding up. It's about everyone's safety.
High pressure for sure. You'd have to be pretty fearless to work in that kind of environment.
For sure. Knowing your work is helping power cities keep things running, That's got to be rewarding, though. And we can't forget another interesting area, suspended scaffolding.
Oh, right. Those platforms you see hanging off skyscrapers, folks cleaning windows, making repairs, hundreds of feet up.
That's it, definitely a niche. You've got to really get rigging techniques, weight distribution, how those forces all work when you're hanging something off a building.
I'm getting sweaty palms just thinking about it. One strong gust of wind.
Right. Not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But for those who love heights, that adrenaline rush and those kinds of challenges, it can be an amazing career. And with cities getting taller all the time.
More skyscrapers, more need for those fearless scaffolding experts.
Exactly. Which brings up a good point. How are these super tall skyscrapers, the ones that make the Eiffel Tower look tiny, how are those impacting the job?
Right, because the higher you go, the bigger the challenges.
Exactly. It's a whole different ballgame. Wind resistance, getting materials up there, even just the time it takes to get everyone to their work area.
I bet those elevator rides aren't for the faint of heart either.
You said it. But it's more than just physical challenges. The higher you build, the more you need technology to keep everything safe. Sensors to track wind, structural integrity, maybe even AI to predict problems before they happen.
Like those sci-fi movies where the building's practically thinking for itself.
Not as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this such a cool field. It keeps changing, pushing the limits, and those working in it, they've got to be ready for anything.
It's not just scaffolding. It's about literally building the future, one platform at a time.
Nicely put. And since we're talking about the future, let's get into some of the cool stuff brewing in the scaffolding world. Because let me tell you, things have changed.
Okay, lay it on me. What kind of next-level scaffolding tech are we talking about?
Well, one of the most exciting things is self-erecting scaffolding systems.
Self-erecting, like those pop-up tents, but for, like, industrial-sized construction projects.
Exactly. Imagine, instead of putting each piece together by hand, you pretty much just inflate the scaffolding using hydraulics or something.
No way. Talk about a time saver. And safer, too, right? Less time spent actually climbing around while it's being built.
Exactly. And when you can put things up faster, you save money on labor, too. So it's a win-win all around.
It's really incredible how technology is changing everything about how we build things. What about materials? Could we see scaffolding parts custom printed on-site using those futuristic materials that are lighter, stronger, better for the environment?
I think that's definitely on the horizon. 3D printing is getting better every day. We're already seeing houses and even bridges being printed.
So it's just a matter of time before we can print out scaffolding components, perfectly made for whatever the project needs.
Right. You just plug the specs into a computer and boom, out come the parts, ready to go.
Sounds like something right out of the Jetsons.
Right. But think about it. Less waste, faster building, and you could create scaffolding in shapes that'd be impossible with the old ways of doing things.
Talk about a game changer. Looks like the sky's the limit for scaffolding, literally.
Exactly. As buildings keep getting taller, the technology's got to keep up.
It's a good thing there are some seriously smart people working on it then. And, you know, one thing that struck me is the sheer knowledge these construction scaffolding supervisors have. They're like walking, talking encyclopedias of engineering and safety.
They don't just build, they have to know why things work, how to keep them safe. It's a really underappreciated job, I think.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who likes a challenge, working with their hands and being part of something big, scaffolding could be the perfect fit.
I agree. And like we've been saying, it's a field that's always changing, always pushing boundaries.
Before we move on, though, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We've talked about the hard work, the responsibility, but does this job pay the bills?
It's a good question, one I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering about. And the good news is, yeah, construction scaffolding supervisors, they make a really good living.
Okay, so we're not talking like minimum wage here.
Not even close. RoleCatcher says, on average, a construction scaffolding supervisor in the U.S. makes about $75,000 a year.
Wow. That's more than double what most people make.
Exactly. And that's just the average. Get some years under your belt, maybe some extra certifications, especially on those big, complex jobs. You can be making six figures.
So there's definitely room to move up, make more money as you go.
Absolutely. And don't forget about overtime. Construction projects, they don't always stick to a neat 9 to 5.
Because you can't just stop building halfway through because it's 5 o'clock.
Exactly. You need to be flexible, work evenings, weekends sometimes, even holidays, to keep things on schedule.
Not a job for folks who are afraid of hard work, that's for sure.
For sure. But for those who are dedicated, who are driven, it pays off. Good money and the satisfaction of seeing what you helped build.
Work hard, see the results, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in scaffolding, that hard work, it often means a good salary, and that feeling of seeing your work come to life in these amazing buildings, these impressive structures.
Speaking of impressive, I gotta ask, what are some of the most incredible scaffolding projects, like, in history? Because we've all seen scaffolding around buildings, but has there ever been, like, a really jaw-dropping use of this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Scaffolding might seem basic, but it's been used for some amazing things over the years.
Okay, give me an example. What's, like, the coolest scaffolding project you've ever heard of?
You know, the one that always gets me is the scaffolding they used to build the Eiffel Tower.
No way. The Eiffel Tower. I can't even imagine the amount of scaffolding it would take to build something that big and complicated.
It was a feat of engineering in itself, honestly.
Hmm.
The tower's over 1,000 feet tall, and the scaffolding had to hold up the weight of all that iron while they were building it, plus deal with the wind in Paris.
I bet they didn't have fancy sensors and weather apps back then.
Yup, they had to rely on their own know-how and a bit of bravery.
Hmm.
And get this, over 1,000,000 kilos of wood, all put together without modern cranes. Mind-blowing.
Seriously, it's like they built a whole wooden city just to hold up the Eiffel Tower while they were making it.
That's exactly what it was like, just
Yeah.
to show how skilled those early scaffolding workers were. Real pioneers.
I can only imagine what it must have been like to be up there on that scaffolding, watching the Eiffel Tower take shape.
Exhilarating and terrifying at the same time, I bet.
Speaking of terrifying, what about those gigantic scaffolding setups they use to repair ships? Ever seen those?
You mean dry docks? Yeah, those are amazing. Basically giant scaffolds that lift a whole ship right out of the water.
It's crazy to think something that huge can be held up by something temporary, like scaffolding.
It really speaks to what we can do with engineering and physics. Dry docks are essential for keeping ships maintained, fixing them, even building new ones.
I can only imagine. Trying to fix a propeller while a ship's bobbing around in the water.
Yeah, not ideal. Dry docks give workers a safe, stable platform so they can do those repairs.
So, from famous landmarks to massive ships, scaffolding has been a part of some seriously impressive projects.
It really has. It's often overlooked, but without it, a lot of the stuff we take for granted just wouldn't exist.
It's like a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary things are actually pretty extraordinary when you think about the history, the skills, and the human ingenuity involved.
Well said.
And speaking of ingenuity, it's clear that the world of scaffolding is only getting more advanced. We've talked about drones, 3D printing, even AI. What else is on the horizon for this industry?
You know, it's funny. With all these incredible innovations, all this high-tech stuff, there's one thing that's still absolutely crucial. The human element.
Because no matter how fancy our technology gets, it can't replace the experience and judgment of a skilled scaffolding supervisor, right?
Exactly. A drone can check a weld, but it takes a human eye to see a tiny crack or a potential problem that wasn't in the original plans.
Like they say, the human brain, still the best computer out there.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about a job where safety is everything, where people's lives literally depend on the work you do, that human element is non-negotiable.
So what makes a scaffolding supervisor stand out? What are those qualities you just can't teach?
First and foremost, I'd say it's that deep sense of responsibility. The best supervisors, they don't just see scaffolding, they see the people who'll be working on it, their families. It's about owning that responsibility for everyone's safety.
So it's not just about checking boxes on a safety form. It's about creating a culture where everyone's looking out for each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads to another essential skill, communication. A great supervisor can explain those complex technical details in a way anyone can get, from experienced workers to brand new apprentices.
Because a safety briefing no one understands is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine.
Exactly. Be clear, be concise, make sure everyone's on the same page. And that goes for everything, not just safety. Coordinating with other teams, figuring out the logistics, dealing with those inevitable surprises, it all comes down to communication.
Like a conductor, making sure everyone in the orchestra is playing the right notes at the right time.
Perfect way to put it. And let's not forget problem-solving skills. Construction sites, they're unpredictable. A good supervisor has to think on their feet, adjust to new info, get creative when something unexpected pops up.
Because let's face it, no matter how well you plan, Mother Nature or a delayed shipment or something totally random can throw a wrench in the works.
You got that right. Being resourceful, knowing how to improvise, staying calm under pressure, those are the things that earn you respect and open doors to those bigger, more exciting jobs.
It's that mix of skills, leadership, and common sense that makes a truly great scaffolding supervisor.
I couldn't agree more. Those are the people who are moving this industry forward, pushing the limits of what we can build, and inspiring the next generation.
It's been amazing taking this deep dive into the world of scaffolding supervision. I think it's safe to say we've all learned a lot. I know I have.
Me too.
And hey, for anyone listening who's feeling inspired, who's thinking, maybe this is the career for me, you got to check out RoleCatcher.
Absolutely. Their career guide breaks it all down, the education you need,
Mm.
different career paths, everything. They even have these AI tools to help you fix up your resume, practice for interviews, all sorts of cool stuff.
It's like having a personal career counselor, right, on your computer.
Exactly. So if you're ready to, reach new heights career-wise, RoleCatcher's the place to start.
Couldn't agree more. Well, on that note, it's time for us to wrap things up. But before we go, next time you're walking by a building under construction, take a second to appreciate that web of scaffolding holding it all up.
It really is amazing what we can build.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been the Deep Dive, everyone. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring.